Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Can you all hear me?
Hare Krishna. Yes.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I guess you can all see my screen also. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I apologize to everyone. I think something happened over the weekend. It seems I was just trying to start the meeting and I noticed that my meeting instance was cancelled. Maybe some confusion. The admin cancelled it. So this weekend, the Sunday school or the Vedic school is starting for all the children. And maybe there was some activity happening, someone trying to figure out something, and they might have accidentally deleted it. So I apologize for that, for the last minute confusion. So it should be fine going forward. I'll communicate offline if they will continue. We'll continue with this link most likely. There should not be any change, but I'll update the group description. Okay. So I hope everyone's doing fine. I think we can get started, but before that, if anyone has any questions from the discussion last week, any comments, I would like to give that opportunity. So we started second chapter last week. I think it was the week before that, but we continued with the discussion, and then now we are going into the actual Krishna actually started speaking, but now today he's going to elaborate more on specifically on the difference between the soul and the body, and will address the concerns or questions that Arjuna had raised. So would anyone like to ask anything at this point in time? Okay. So I believe we ended at verse 6, and we can get started with verse number 7. Karpanya doso pahata svabhava Pritchami tvam dharma samudaceta yachreyasyanischitam bruhi tanme shishyasteham sadimam tvam prapannam. So this is a slightly different meter. So in Sanskrit recitation, each, depending on how many syllables are there in each line, there's a different meter in which verses can be recited. And I'm not an expert when it comes to chanting in different meters. Again, it's a very technical science, and you can take years of training in reciting and figuring out, just looking at the verse, how many, based on how many syllables, what meter it should be sung in. So for instance, if you see, each line should have exactly the same number of syllables, right? So a syllable is essentially a combination of consonant and vowels, right? So ka is consonant ka plus the vowel a, right? So that becomes ka. So that together becomes one syllable, right? So if you look at, so in this particular line, so this is one syllable. This is a half and a full. So let's just count it. I'm going to ignore the half syllable. So you have 1, 2, right? There's another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So if you just count the full syllables, you have 11 over here. So let's count here. Second line, 1, you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You see? So this one also has 11 syllables. Now if you count the next line, the line after that, they would all have exactly the same number of syllables, right? And what this allows is that you can, if you're chanting in a particular meter, we can chant in exactly the same tune, if you will. I'm not sure if tune is the right word, but that's what they call it, a meter, particular pattern of singing. And we can repeat the next line exactly in the same pattern because it has exactly the same number of syllables. Now the number of words might be different. As you can see, each of this line, they have different number of words, but across all the words, the number of syllables are always the same. And so that's another constraint within which any composition in Sanskrit is limited to. It also acts like a parity check, where no one can just go and change a verse so easily, right? Because anytime you want to change something, then make sure that number of syllables don't change. Now the meaning cannot be something completely contradicting the previous verse, right? Because there's a logical flow, right? Somebody can find out like, hey, this is not consistent. So it should be consistent with the flow of the thought in previous verses. It should be consistent with the chapter theme, and it should be consistent with the book. And you cannot just change one syllable and without messing up the whole thing. So so one thing it serves is a parity check, kind of making sure the integrity of the scripture is maintained, but then it also allows us to sing in a poetic form. So as you can see, it's composing Sanskrit poetry is not an ordinary thing. In Sanskrit, the order of the word does not matter. In any other language, if you see, say if I say I am going out for a walk, that's the flow of words. I cannot say I walk going out am, right? That makes no sense. But in Sanskrit, it makes sense. The order does not matter. And again, I don't want to go too much in detail about it, but the reason why order does not matter is there is something called vibhakti, which means each noun as well as the action, they take different forms based on whether it is first person, second person, third person, whether it is singular, whether it's plural, and on top of that, it could change based on gender. On top of that, again, it changes. The form of the word changes based on whether it is nominative case, accusative, dative, ablative, vocative, locative. So there are different forms. And what it's the same word or the same action, but the fact that it assumes different forms, it allows, it adds that complexity, but at the same time it allows the order to be changed, and doesn't matter what order you place the words in the sentence, it still means the same thing. So, and because of that flexibility of changing the order of the words, you can create verses which could be chanted in a poetic fashion. So again, just a little digression, but I just wanted to point that out. As you might have noticed, I chanted this verse in a different meter because the number of syllables are different compared to what we have been reciting in the previous verses. Okay, so yeah, coming back to the discussion, translation. So now Arjun is finally, surrendering over here. He's saying that I'm confused about my duty, and I have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple, and the soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So it's pretty interesting. There's a change in Arjuna's stance. He is now actually asking for help. Till now he was making different arguments and propositions of what he considered to be righteous and why he does why he doesn't want to fight. But now he's saying that, well, I'm confused, I don't know what needs to be done, and I'm asking you to help me out. And he's making an important statement. He's saying that now I'm your disciple and soul surrendered unto you, please instruct me. So if you see Krishna and Arjuna's relationship, right? They are actually cousins, and though we might have siblings and cousins, if there is a difference in age, right, then it's not as friendly. For instance, if one of your brothers, if there is a significant age difference, if that person is elder to you, then there's a more awe and reverence involved. Or if one is younger, and or if our cousin or a sibling is younger to us, then we tend to take a kind of parental role, right? So it's not on equal level. In case of Arjuna and Krishna, they were same age, and so their relationship was, though they were cousins, they were really good friends. Unlike if you look at the other siblings or the other Pandavas, so Nakul and Sahadev, they were younger than Arjuna, and Bhima and Yudhishthir, they were older than Arjuna, right? So Krishna had a very special relationship with Arjuna. They were the same age, and they used to play together when they used to get together since their childhood. And they had very friendly relationships. Sometimes they used to fight, they used to eat in the same plate, or they would. So in that way, it was a very intimate kind of relationship. And when you are you're very personally connected with someone, you take that individual as granted, right? I mean, you don't, because of that personal relationship, we don't look into other aspects. That person might be very important for others, might have an important position in the society, might be respected, but for us, he's just our someone who is very dear to us. And because we ignore the other aspect of that person, that actually allows us to have that intimate relationship, right? Like, my son does not care what kind of position I have in my company, right? I'm his father, right? And he has that special bonding. And so similarly, Arjuna, he was, for him, Krishna was just a friend, a cousin, right? And with that kind of rapport or relationship, Arjuna took him lightly, took him granted many times. And in such a situation, you cannot really instruct anyone, right? I mean, where when you cannot take a position of authority. So same thing with Krishna. Krishna could have spoken Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna long time ago, right? He never did, right? Because the situation never arose, right? There was no need. Just like if you go and tell something to someone out of the blue, that person cannot relate to it, like, where are you, why all of a sudden you're talking about this, right? And I did not ask you anything, and so same thing. So Krishna never instructed Arjuna, but now Arjuna really needs that help. And again, we are now in the second chapter. Now actually, when Arjuna is asking for help, he's saying, I'm surrendering to you as a disciple. And then Krishna can take the charge of an authority. He can take the charge of being a teacher, a guru, and then he can instruct me. Unless that that moment arises, you really cannot help or instruct anyone, right? Because it's just so unnatural. It might even appear weird, like, who are you? So so that is a very important point, is that unless one really feels that need to surrender and has that inquisitiveness, the response, even if someone is there to help you, they won't help you, right? So here, yeah, that's the point I was saying. Yeah, unless one is inquisitive, no amount of external help can help, right? So they were Krishna and Arjuna had a very special kind of relationship. I mentioned that. Similarly, most people, they are not interested in spirituality, right? Until some life event happens. Like Arjuna, for him, a life event happened, right? He is now put into perplexity. He does not know what needs to be done. And so he is approaching and surrendering to Krishna. So same thing, if you take anyone, even I, at certain point, I was inquisitive about spiritual life, and I had some life experiences which actually made me think, what is this all about? What's the meaning of life? And until I had that moment, I came across Bhagavad Gita so many times. I've been to temples so many times, and I was not never in the mental mind frame to be inquisitive or to inquire. But it's our experiences, and we are any life events or particular instances that makes us inquire, are put into a situation, then we start questioning, and that is actually the beginning of human life. Athatho Brahma Jigyasu. Hence the inquiry into the absolute truth. So later in Bhagavad Gita, we will learn that Krishna says that there are four kind of people who approach him, right? Artho, Jigyasu, Artharthi, Jnani. So Artho means people who are distressed, who people are put into extreme material distress or some kind of, and they are, because of their piety. So many people are put into anxiety. That doesn't mean they take to spirituality. But people who have some piety and because of the cultural background, like, hey, I see that people who are powerful, rich, successful, everything that one might aspire for, they are still not happy. And then there is no such thing as permanent happiness, it seems, or somehow or other they feel, okay, there must be something, there must be an answer, let me look into spirituality. And so they might not even be looking specifically for an ultimate solution to problems, but they might be just that particular problem which they might be experiencing extreme pain or affliction, and they just want to solve that problem, and they might approach to spirituality or approach Lord directly, to Krishna. So those are the first category, is distressed, and you can see on a sensual platform, because we'll learn later in this chapter that the distress arises because of contact of sense object with senses. So extreme heat, extreme cold. I'm giving a very a gross example, gross in the sense that it's directly at a sensual level. Like last week, like we are already hunkered down due to pandemic, but then there was forest fires, right? And the air quality was so bad you can't even go out, right? And there is extreme heat. A lot of homes over in this area don't even have air conditioning because you don't need it. But now, because the air quality is so bad, all the windows are also closed, and so on a sensual level, there is one kind of distress. Now, mind is also a sense, and there could be mental distress. So the distress is generally on a sensual level. Now, the next category of people are Jigyasu. That means curiosity. Now, if our all bodily needs are met, we don't have extreme anxiety, and we are more or less doing fine, you know, put into extreme distress, then we can arise above the sensual level and then on and come to a mental level. So the inquisitives, the jigyasus, they are on a mental level. They're curious, right? You know, sometimes, say, you know, we go out and okay, I have a free day, I have a weekend, I want to go out. You go to downtown or wherever there is a summertime, you know, nice weather, and there is something happening and you're curious, oh, what's going on over there? Maybe there's a fair going on, you can check, I'm going to go and check that out. Or you know, you see a lot of people in the evening, they just stroll around, and especially in big cities where you know there is a commune where you know there might be some live music going on or so many different things, but we are in general inquisitive, or okay, what is it, let me find that out, right? So in this way, sometimes, you know, we, like at the temple, we have different programs. So we have a 6-session program called Discover Yourself, which is a brief introduction in 6 session about spirituality. And sometimes people join and we ask, like, oh, you know, what interested you? And they would say, well, I was just curious, right? So curiosity, we could be curious about so many things. And similarly, like, okay, I'm now curious about spirituality. They're not necessarily distressed, but they are curious to know. And so jigyasus, Krishna says, that the second category of people who approach me. Beyond the jigyasus are artha-arthi, meaning, you know, they are intellectuals. They want something that is of value. Curiosity is just satisfying curiosity, and then satisfaction of curiosity doesn't mean that I'm seeking something that is necessarily valuable. You know, I have time, I'm free, and I'm curious about this. I might be curious about something else, and it might be, you know, valuable to me, or it might not be valuable to me, but that's okay. I'm just curious to know. But those who are artha-arthi, they are actually acting on an intellectual level, not on a mental level. Intellectual person will always ask, what is there in it for me? So the artha-arthi, they want to see, okay, maybe I can benefit somehow from this. And they have some inkling that, you know, there's something valuable in there, and I want to get that value, you know, that is valuable, and that could literally mean sometimes some material gain. Sorry, so people sometimes, you know, approach the Lord to get material prosperity. That's one way of, you know, that's also one level of intelligence, because you're saying, okay, material prosperity is good for me, and then, you know, they have some faith that in the Almighty Lord can provide that to me, and so I'm going to approach the Lord. That's one way of thinking. Or even, you know, maybe there's something in Bhagavad Gita that I can learn, and I can apply that to my life, and I can live a better life. I can be a better person. And that's also, they are approaching spirituality because they think that, no, this has something valuable to offer. I don't know exactly what, but I'm sure there's more. And so you see, they are not just curious. You know, they are acting on an intellectual platform. And the fourth category of people, they are the transcendentalists, or not actually, you know, what we call the jnanis, which seek liberation. The jnanis, they have, by their personal observation, and they have studied the nature of the world, and you know, they've seen that, well, in this world there is suffering, and you know, no matter whom you take, you know, no matter how successful one is, they all have some sort of misery, and their happiness is interspersed by, you know, different difficulties. It's not permanent. And so, but then they are intelligent to also notice that, well, other needs like hunger, thirst, you know, those needs are fulfilled. Similarly, if our desire is to be always eternally happy, then there should be some means to get it, and they want a permanent solution to the unnatural situation. They know there is something unnatural about it. They don't know, you might not know exactly what it is, and so they take to spirituality to find a permanent solution to all misery. So now they are not acting they are beyond intellectual phase, where, you know, they are you know, really trying to get into the roots of what one's identity is, and you know, how that original identity can be experienced and reestablished. So these are the four kind of people who approach. Krishna. And so Arjuna's case over here is the first category, you can say. He's distressed, and in that distress he is approaching Krishna to help him find a solution. So it doesn't matter which of the four categories are, because you can classify into sensual, mental, intellectual, and transcendental categories. But no matter how one approaches Krishna, if one approaches sincerely, one will eventually get to the absolute truth. Okay. So in the purport, so the note over here is Krishna might not take his cousin seriously, and so Arjuna is emphasizing that he's approaching as a disciple and not as a cousin. So that's why Arjuna is explicitly saying that, I am your surrendered disciple. So Arjuna also might similarly think that, Krishna might just take me lightly, think, oh, he's just, Arjuna, he does not know my position. He might just say this in a very light fashion, hey, help me. But so in order to avoid that confusion, Arjuna is basically saying that, hey, I'm serious, Krishna. I'm not. I know we have a very friendly relationship, but now I'm not approaching you as a friend. I am approaching you as a disciple, and so that's also a very important point. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that by nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. So, this is the conclusion of those jnanis. They have studied the nature of the world, and they have ascertained that by nature, by design, this world is just is a source of perplexity. Every step there is a perplexity, and therefore it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. So there is a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. It says, it's a very nice verse. Ye samasrita pada pallav plavam mahat padam punya yasho murare bhavam mambudir vatsa padam param padam yad vipadam natesham. So it's a very poetic verse in the sense that the word pada is used so many times. Almost every other word in this verse is pada, and it's used in a different context in every instance. It's a very deep philosophical meaning. It says that at every step in this world is some sort or other sort of danger. Therefore, the ultimate destination of those who are intelligent should be the supreme step or the supreme position. The step can also mean a position. What is the supreme position? The abode of the Lord. That is what we should aspire for. And if we do that, what happens is that this whole material world, which seems unsurmountable, will become like a water contained in the footprint. Again, a step, footprint of a calf. So calf's footprint is so small, right? And sometimes in that footprint, the water is contained and becomes like a small puddle. In India, we might have observed in the fields, if you have experience when the cattle go on the fields, you might create those small puddles, and you can easily jump over those puddles. So similarly, this material world is compared to an ocean of nations. It's not difficult to cross over. But by taking shelter of the supreme step, Param Padam is the lotus feet of Krishna, one can cross over this material world, which then becomes as small as the calf's footprint. And says that should be the supreme destination, not this place where at every step there is a danger. So in this way, the word step is used in different ways. So, Srila Prabhupada is summarizing that in this, 3 words. He's actually referring to that verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. He says in every step there is perplexity, and therefore one should approach a spiritual master. All Vedic literatures thus advise to approach a bona fide spiritual master to get free from the perplexities of life, which happen without our desire. They are like a forest fire that somehow blazes without being set by anyone. So we have a direct experience of this last week, and still it's going on, especially in California. Today we had some respite because of the rain, and so the smoke has subsided. But the forest fire, right? Nobody goes and sometimes somebody might purposefully start a forest fire, but most of the time, the forest fire just starts on its own. Like recently, what happened, this year the heat was relatively much more. I was noticing even the grass outside on the landscape in our community or even in our city. during summer, it still used to be green. It never used to be dry. And this year I noticed it's so dry. And then, right at time, there were thunderstorms and there were so many lightnings, and, one of the lightnings, struck the grass, and then the the fires in eastern Washington started because of the dry grass. And then the wind, because of the wind, the flames, they catch on, and, the fire travels quickly, and everything started blazing. So, these forest fires, they start on their own, right? It's not that somebody purposefully is doing that. And in the whole thing starts burning and blazing. So this material world is compared to a forest fire, samsara davanala. Or even when we live in the cities, you always see this, every now and then you hear the fire truck, the fire engine, going down the road with the emergency lights and the sounds on. And so even in the cities, the fire is happening, so this material world is a place where the miseries, right? So fire is an example of the kind of emergency situation that one might be put into. Even at work, what's the phrase that we use? There's a fire drill. Something important or urgent comes up, and one needs to solve some problem. Then you put aside all other work and duties, and like, hey, this is a fire that we need to put in. So that's the word they use. Like even in English lingo at work, they say, hey, there is a fire drill. So fire, it's the apex of all examples when it comes to the problems that we have in this material world. So similarly, the world situation is such that perplexities of life automatically appear without our wanting such confusion. No one wants fire, yet it takes place and we become perplexed. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, Prahlad, who is a devotee of Lord Narasimha, is saying that, have you seen anyone who is working hard to be miserable? No, right? We don't know. We work hard to become happy, to be successful, to achieve something. But no one works hard to be miserable. Still the miseries come. So this is Prahlad Maharaj's observation. He's saying, even without working hard, the miseries come. Even without working hard to be miserable, the miseries come. Similarly, happiness will also come on its own accord, even if we don't try to become happy. We don't have to achieve something to be happy. By nature's arrangement, everyone experiences happiness and distress in due course of time according to their karma. Of course, that doesn't mean we have to stop our duties. Like Arjuna, Krishna is the whole reason Bhagavad Gita is spoken. Krishna is telling Arjuna, well, you need to do your duties, right? We are forced to act according to our nature. That doesn't mean so the purpose of doing duties is different. It's not to achieve something. Initially we might be motivated to work in order to achieve something, but that's not the actual purpose of prescribed duties. Prescribed duties have a much higher purpose, which we'll talk in further detail. So the happiness and distress, it comes on their own accord. Sometimes, by working hard, one can be successful and they can achieve something, but just because they achieve what they desired doesn't mean, that achievement would make that person happy. Just like Arjuna, he can foresee, okay, if I fight this war and I have the skills and, I have the guidance and I'm confident I can win and I will be successful, but by being successful, I will still not be happy, right? So that's the point. By working hard, one can be successful, but success in itself does not necessarily make one happy. And that's what Prahlad Maharaj is saying, that just like, when no one works hard to be miserable, one did not over endeavor to become happy. Happiness will come in due course of time. And I think, I don't know if I gave this example in this class, but many times I give this example where something that I personally observed once I was traveling in a local train in Mumbai, and then a lot of these trains, they pass through what you would call like slum kind of localities. There's sewer passing, and there are shanty dwellings which people living in. In middle of that, looks like it was a wedding ceremony that was happening, and there was lot of lights and music, and people were happy and dancing, and you see the happiness on the face of those people. You know, they're oblivious to the fact that, you know, they are the surroundings are the ambience is something, you know, what we would consider as you know, not habitable. But for them, you know, but what's really struck me is that the happiness that I see on the face of people, that it's the same happiness that one might experience where while attending a wedding party in Oberoi or Taj Mahal hotel, right, or the Hotel Taj. So in a 5-star hotel, but it's a different standard of the celebration, right? And everything you can say is on a different level. But it is our expectation of what we call, you know, substandard or high standard, right? And it is all relative, right? But and so what actually stimulates us based on our past experiences might be different. You know, for somebody who is really accustomed to living a high standard of life, you know, they might feel uncomfortable in a substandard living conditions. But for those who have not experienced anything better, right, they are able to experience the same joy, like, you know, the smile and the happiness. You cannot say that, you know, is any different from someone who is you know, experiencing or having the same celebration and at a much higher standard of living. You know, that there is not difference. That doesn't mean that the standard of living both are same. They are different, but you know, I think if you get the point, what I'm trying to say is that one can, it's all relative, and there is then these relative experiences and relative pleasures are just created by the mind. It's a product of mind, of what we considered better or not so good. But the joy is always the same. Okay, I hope that is clear. Are there any questions or confusion, doubts in that regard? Okay. So Srila Prabhupada further explains that one must approach a spiritual master who is in a disciplic succession. That is important. You know, there are so many people who poses as a guru and they have their own philosophy. And then we discussed in the last class the verse from Mahabharata. One is not a rishi unless he, you know, gives as an opinion that is unique. But that uniqueness, it might give someone prestige in terms of, hey, I'm able to think differently. But, you know, thinking differently and independently of the conclusion of the Vedic literature, or independently of a bona fide sampradaya that is coming from the Mahajans, is not, you know, it's not beneficial. And so that's why it's important that one approaches the spiritual science from someone who comes in a bona fide disciplic succession. One should not therefore remain in material perplexities, but one should approach a spiritual master. This is the purport of this verse. So this is what we learn from Arjuna, how Arjuna approached Krishna. I have any other notes over here? I'm just going to check. Yeah, so we discussed all that. Okay. So in Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, it is described that one is considered a miserly man who does not solve the problems of a life in the human form of life, and just quits this world like cats and dogs without understanding the science of self-realization. And that's an interesting comparison. So who is a miser, right? Anyone whom would you consider as a miser? I mean, in a colloquial sense, not according to this definition in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, but, you know, in a common language, whom would you call a miser? Anyone wants to answer that? Who is a miser?
Who doesn't spend money.
Yeah, doesn't spend money, right? So somebody has a lot of wealth and they are just hoarding all the wealth.
Right.
Right. But then if you don't use the wealth, then it's no good. Like, you know, there is a a story in one of the Puranas where one person was so rich in ancient times, they don't have banks or safes, and what he did, he dug a, dug a hole in the ground, and then he used to hide all the wealth in there. But every now and then he would go and check just to make sure it's there, but he would never use it. And one day some of the thieves, they found out, maybe while he was digging and checking. And so after that person left, the thieves came, they dug up that place, and then they took the wealth along with them. And that person started crying. And then, then a saint comes by. I believe it was Narada Muni, but I could be wrong. And he asked, like, why are you crying? He says, I stored all my wealth over here and it got stolen. He says, oh, really? Well, what did you do with that wealth? I said, no, I just saved it. I didn't use it. I said, oh, you just want something to look at, right? So why don't you, get a stone and, paint it with gold color? If you had, because all previously money means no paper currency, it's all, gold coins. And then you can just look at it and be happy, right? So if you just want to look at it, that's not going to help. So Chanakya Niti, which gives a lot of practical instructions on how we should live. One of the things Chanakya Pandit says is that, one who wealth is wasted by not using it. That's an important statement. Of course, that doesn't mean we accrue a lot of debt. That's another extreme where we borrow beyond our means, which is the Charaka philosophy of atheism. We also discussed that in the previous class, where Charaka is saying that what is it? Yavat jivet lavo jivet rinam kritva gritam pibet. As long as you live happily, take debt, but then drink ghee. So not like that, but whatever wealth one has, if you don't use it, then it's waste of wealth. Similarly, you can apply that logic for a higher purpose. What Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says is that what's the difference between human life and animal life? The human can inquire about the problems of life, inquire about spirituality, inquire about afterlife, the purpose of life. The cats and dogs cannot. So despite of getting this rare human form of life, which is not easily attained, one who does not use that advanced intelligence to solve the ultimate problems of life, that person is a miser. Just like a miser person, despite of having all the wealth, does not utilize it. So that's a very interesting definition. So the advanced intelligence is given, and we can use this intelligence in so many different ways. And like if you see the advancement of civilization, all the technology that we use, right? It's a product of an advanced intelligence, and that's one way of utilizing intelligence. But despite of using that advanced intelligence for developing advanced technology, that does not solve the 4 problems of life: birth, old age, disease, and death, right? But we can use the same intelligence to find the ultimate solution to these 4 problems, and that is real advancement, right? So no matter how much technology can develop, no matter how much medical science develops, right? See, now the science of vaccination has been there for a long time, but that doesn't mean new diseases don't come up, like this corona virus caused COVID-19, right? And once the vaccine is found, and maybe once we get immunity, that doesn't mean that there won't be any new diseases. The diseases are always ahead of us. There's no permanent solution to diseases. You can find a medicine for a disease to cure it, but that doesn't mean that diseases won't happen or new diseases won't come up. So the real use of intelligence, how do you find a permanent solution to everything and not do a quick fix? So that's what the real use of intelligence is. Just a sec. Okay, sorry about that. So this human form of life is the most valuable asset for the living entity. And we can utilize it for solving all the problems of life. So we talked about that. On the other hand, there is the Brahmana, or he who is intelligent enough to utilize his body to solve all the problems of life. What is this example? Yeah, this human form of life is the most valuable asset for the living entity who can utilize it for solving the problems of life. Therefore, one who does not utilize this opportunity properly is a miser. On the other hand, the Brahmana, or he who is intelligent enough to utilize the body to solve all the problems of life. So Brahmana is basically one. Brahmana means one who is seeking the Brahman, or the absolute truth. So the real use of intelligence is basically solving the problem of life. That's what it's trying to say. The Kripanas, or miserly person, waste their time in being overly affectionate to family, society, country, etc. in the material conception of life. Overly means they are so busy that they won't take time off for spiritual realizations. Of course, that doesn't mean that we give up our commitment. We have duties. Our part of the prescribed duties is taking care of our family. But then uh, a devotee or a transcendentalist, he also takes care of the family, but their understanding is different. Their understanding is on a spiritual level. Well, that hey, this spirit soul is a part and parcel of Krishna, right? And Krishna has given me the responsibility to take care of this individual, and so I'm doing that service. So it's not on a bodily conception of life. The cats and dogs, they don't think like that, right? They also take care of their kids and their family members, but they are not thinking on a spiritual level. And once the understanding is based on a spiritual level, how it is helpful is that in the varnashram system, after initially there's brahmacharya or celibate student life, then there is a grihastha life, and after the kids are grown up and they are self-sufficient, the civilized members of varnashram society, what they do is they go to vanprastha, or they voluntarily live an austere life. And then some of them might take the life of renunciation, which is sannyas eventually. But vanprasth, or the retired life, the concept of retired life is still there, but the idea of retired life in the present context is that, well, you have your life savings and use that money to live a nice comfortable life. Now the idea of comfort and enjoyment would be different for different people. For some people is, well, if I have enough money to just pay my bills, and I'm maybe just engaged in some activities that I like, and I like pass my life easily, maybe in association with my grandchildren or things like that. There's some sort of, not something necessarily they are looking for extreme sense enjoyment, but just nice comfortable life. But they're not necessarily interested in spiritual realization, because as a retired person, one has more time and bandwidth to actually focus on spirituality. And there are others who really want to use that retired life for more enjoyment. Like, especially in this country, we see that they generally would sell their home and buy an RV, and you get into an RV and go all around the country, visit different national parks, and enjoy the nature, and that's one form of enjoyment. Or I lived in Miami for 5 years. I know people, they would sell their home and get a lifelong pass to be on a cruise, and then they would cruise and go all over the world, right? In Vedic culture, the idea of travel is also there, but vanprasth, meaning that they will go to different holy places, they travel through different forests, and there are so many different holy places. They go on a pilgrimage. So the idea of travel is also there, in the Vedic culture, but that's for spiritual realization. So it's a different kind of retired life, as opposed to traveling for just enjoying. There's no end to sense enjoyment. So anyway, so the point over here is that miserly person, they waste their time in being overly affectionate to family, society, country, in the material conception of life. So that is a difference. It doesn't mean that we don't serve our family, society, and country, but when the understanding is based on spirit, then the mood in which we are serving our family, society, and country is also very different. We are not overly attached. We do it out of our sense of duty, and we know at what point we need to stop and then take up the spiritual life in a fully devoted fashion, right? Once we retire and we have more time and bandwidth to be able to do that. So that is a difference. Yeah, we discussed that. So one is often attached to family life, namely to wife, children, other members, on the basis of skin disease. So, again, the same point. It's what is the difference between a materialist and a spiritualist? Both of them are doing the same activity. They are also serving, but the materialist is serving on the idea of that this is my bodily extension, and the whole attachment is on a bodily platform. The spiritual understanding is different. They serve a person as a spirit soul. The Kripana thinks that he is able to protect his family members from death, or Kripana thinks that his family or society can save him from the verge of death. So many times we see the example that the individual goes out of the way to even after all the responsibilities are complete, even in the advanced stage, they are worried about their children and their grandchildren. What will happen? Do I have enough wealth? I want to make sure that they are comfortable, and so they're constantly thinking, and like I want to make sure I'm going to protect them. So protecting from the death is the ultimate protection that one would like to extend, but then in other ways also they might want to protect their family members, like, hey, make sure they have good education and they are financially situated. Or the other extreme could be where person thinks that I've served my family and society so long, and with the hope, many people, they say that, hey, in my advanced old age, the people whom I served will take care of me and they will save me from the verge of death. Again, death is the ultimate protection that we seek from. No one wants to die, but even at another dimension of understanding, like when I'm incapable of doing anything because of because of advanced age, and I want my, you're sort of dependent on your family, and you actually not dependent, your expectation is that your family members would take care of you, especially you see in the um, in the Indian culture or some of the traditional cultures. That idea is there. Of course, in the modern life, everyone lives in a nuclear family away from their parents, and sometimes old people just live in old age homes. But the Vedic culture is that, well, they understand that no one can protect, right? What is it? Eko jantur prasuyate, eka eva hi praliyate. Eko anubhrungte sukritam, eka eva hi duskritam. One takes birth in this world alone, one dies alone. One alone enjoys the good results of one's pious activities, and one alone suffers the miseries due to their bad karma. So, realizing the essence, those who are in Vedic culture, why do they go vanprasth? He said, your family members, either they won't be capable of saving you or taking care of you in the old age, or they might not have the time to do it, or the bandwidth to do it. They are busy with other things, or they might just not be interested in doing it. And so what they do, they voluntarily give up the family. He said, instead of having that expectation from our family members, which they won't be able to fulfill, let me go to a holy place. Let me go on a pilgrimage, and let me die, while seeking spiritual perfection in a holy place, instead of being dependent on my family members. So, that is an advanced understanding, right? I had this practical example, and I think it was about 20 years ago. I was living in Mumbai for some time, and my maternal grandmother, she and her family, they were in South Gujarat, so it's a couple of hours of train ride. And my maternal grandmother had become a widow at a very young age. My mom was, not even in her teens when, her father had passed away. And in that age, my maternal grandmother, as a chaste widow, she used to follow all the customs. She always wore white sari all her life, but then she had the responsibility to take care of all her family members. And so she used to walk few miles every day just to go to the schools. She used to teach at the schools. She was the first lady teacher in an entire district or something, I can't remember, or even probably larger region. And then she would walk and come down and cook and take care of, raise 3 kids. And then basically I got a call that, well, it looks like from my maternal uncle that it looks like she won't live more than few days. And so we took the train next day to arrive there, and she was probably 90 years old. The body, there was nothing left in her body. It was completely bones. There was no flesh, bones, and just skin. You could actually see the skeleton. It was very, she could not stand up and walk. Extremely miserable situation. At the same time, my cousin, the daughter of my maternal uncle, she had a baby. And I've been reading Bhagavatam and for some time, and reading spiritual literatures gives you a spiritual vision to look at things. And so I went inside that room. I talked with my maternal grandmother for a few minutes. Of course, she could not respond. I don't know even if she was able to recognize or see properly. And so in that room, she was helpless. She cannot, she no control over passing stool, urine, or eating, completely helpless. In the next room is also a baby, few months old. That's also completely helpless. The baby cannot eat on its own, has no control over passing stool and urine. Both are exactly in the same helpless situation. But I noticed the entire family members, including me, after spending some time with my, maternal grandmother was about to pass away, again went to that room, and everyone was playing with the baby. Nice, cute baby, very soft body, is giggling, and everyone is enjoying. We are getting a pleasure playing with the baby. It's some sort of enjoyment. Both are helpless. The ladies, the old grandmother is helpless. The baby is also helpless. Both need help. But what do? We associate where we get sense enjoyment. It's nice to play with the baby. It's cute and, it's soft. And the old body is all wrinkled. It's not, so smooth, and it's ugly. It's not good to look at, though both are equally in the same helpless situation. So this is a creation of the Lord, and it's not without any reason. The Lord creates the body of a baby in such an attractive way that it's natural that people would be attracted. The baby still has to grow. He has to learn so many things. And because it's so nice to play with the baby, that no one would mind cleaning the stool and the urine. And and then in this way the baby will get all the support and everything by which the baby can grow and become an adult and realize the purpose of life. The old age is created purposefully in a way that people realize that, hey, as I get old, no one likes me. And as soon as we get that realization, we can naturally develop the feeling of renunciation. That if you see, I should not have high expectations, because no one likes an old person. And instead of being dependent and a burden on them, let me voluntarily accept all miseries and seek spiritual perfection by going to holy places. And that's why in the old age, so ancient times, people used to just go on a pilgrimage by walking. What it means in present context is, people might go and stay in a guest house or a hospice or an old age care in a holy place with other devotees or other transcendentalists, and instead of being dependent on or burden on others, they still might have some assistant to help them out with their basic needs. Of course, in this age, we cannot expect high level of austerity, but the essence is still the same. So it's a reason why this the bodily deformation and other inconveniences are purposefully created by the arrangement of the nature by Krishna, is so that we can develop renunciation by seeing the reality of the life. And so that's something I wanted to share. So so such family attachment can be found even in lower animals who take care of children. Being intelligent, Arjuna could understand this affection for family members and his wish to protect them from death were the cause of his perplexity. So here Arjuna is also trying to do what? He is trying to protect his family members from death, right? So we saw two examples. One is thinking that I want to protect my family members until my last moment, right? There's another story in Srimad Bhagavatam, or not Srimad Bhagavatam, sorry, one of the Puranas, where it is said that a person, is approached by a saintly person. Hey, what are you doing? You should take interest in spirituality. He said, no, I understand that, but right now I have to take care of my family members. He says, okay, I'll come back when you're retired. So he comes back. He says, no, yeah, you're right, but I know my family responsibilities are over. But I have to, now I have grandchildren, and my children, they still don't have the necessary experience to raise kids, and so they still need my valuable attention. And so I cannot take up spirituality right now. Let me just focus a little bit more. And then it goes on like that, and I just try to cut it short, but eventually he dies. And then because of his past karma, he does not get a human form of life. I think he goes to a couple of different species of life. I think at one point he becomes a snake, and then as a snake he again comes to the home, and then he's just going around the home all the time. And then the saint comes again, and he's able to see, because of his mystic vision, that hey, he's the same person. He says, I see that you became a snake. At least now whatever happened we cannot change, but I can still help you. Why you should take to spiritual life, though you still have a body of snake. I can help you out. I said, no, I still have important things to do. See, my sons, they are all fools. They don't know how to take their responsibilities. I saved so much money for them. I have hidden this wealth below this tree. I have told him, but he does not take enough care in guarding this treasure. So I'm always going around this place, and making sure no one comes over here, and even comes, I would bite that person. I want to keep this treasure safe for my family members. And so he's always guarding. He's still worried about his family members in his next life. And then one day his son comes, and he says, somebody complains there is a snake out in the courtyard, and he says, we see him quite often. He says, oh, let me go and fix that. And so his son comes with a stick. He beats the crap out of him, and he dies again in the snake body. And they get another body. So the moral of the story is that there's no end to, at some point one has to quit, in the sense that one has to take up spiritual life fully, right? Of course, that doesn't mean one prematurely gives up their responsibilities. But the point that Prabhupada is making, Kripana thinks that he is able to protect his family members from death, or in other ways, where, like this story that we heard, is going to the extremity to protect his family members, right? Where even life after life is just dedicated to the cause. But what happened in the end? Whom he considered as a son, his son does not recognize him in the body of a snake, and his son became the cause of his death. So coming back to the discussion, so Arjuna, although he could understand there is a duty to fight was awaiting him because of his miserly weakness. So that's the point, right? So coming back to the point is, it's not that Arjuna was weak in a physical way. It's not that he was not adept in skills. It's not that he was not capable to fight. The weakness was what? Weakness was miserly weakness. He was acting as a miser. He thought he is very intelligent. He's talking high philosophy, but what's the first thing that Krishna says when he starts speaking? He says that you sound very intelligent, but actually all your magnanimity in essence is just weakness of heart. And so that is miserly. One is using that intelligence to come up with something to justify one's position, but that position has is like using one's intelligence to, instead of solving the ultimate problems of life, we use intelligence to create so many conveniences and advancements of material comforts, which is not going to solve the root cause of all the miseries, right? So that is miserly use of intelligence. Similarly, Arjuna, despite of his advanced philosophy, he was acting like a miser. So Arjuna is finally offering himself as a disciple to Krishna, and he wants to stop all the friendly talks. Talks between master and a disciple are serious. Now Arjuna wants to talk very seriously before we recognize spiritual master. So Krishna is the original master of the science of Bhagavad Gita, and Arjuna is the first disciple for understanding the Gita. How Arjuna understands the Bhagavad Gita is stated in the Bhagavad Gita itself. Yet the foolish, mundane scholars explain that one need not submit to Krishna as a person, but to the unborn within Krishna. So this is paraphrasing of later in Bhagavad Gita we'll see that Krishna instructs that you surrender unto me. And there are some commentators who comment on that, saying that, hey, this verse is not saying that you have to surrender to Krishna, but you have to surrender to the unborn spiritual truth which is within Krishna. So that is an interpretation, and then that interpretation has no basis. So that's what Prabhupada is saying in the next line. So there is no difference between Krishna's within and without. So in our case, we have a body. Within the body, there is a soul. In Krishna, there is no such thing as he's a soul and then he has acquired a body. For him, spirit and matter, there is no. It's all one. It's not that he is he's not. It's not that he is a soul and then his body is different. It's all one. If Krishna is not like us, if he was like us, then why bother listening to what Krishna has to say? Why we are studying Bhagavad Gita? He's just like us. If he also has a body, and there is a spirit within him. So this interpretation, that idea that we have to surrender to the unborn within Krishna and not to Krishna, is simply an speculation. So we talked about Occam's razor in the very first or the second class in the introduction. It's a principle in science which says if you want to solve a problem and there are many solutions, and some of them might be very complex solutions, the simplest or the straightforward answer is probably solution is probably the right one, right? So I think I'm paraphrasing in the Occam's razor. I think there is a technical definition to it, but in essence, this is what it means. And so similarly, any verse when we read, or in any language, not about verse, like when I'm explaining you something, how are you understanding it? You're understanding mostly by the direct meaning of that word. There is no need for interpretation. One word could mean so many different things, but the natural and the direct meaning is what you would take. The interpretation comes when things are not clear. When things are clear, there's no need for interpretation. If Krishna is standing in front of Arjuna, is saying, you have to surrender to me, the direct meaning is Krishna, when he says me, he is referring to himself. There's no need for interpretation where he's saying, no, it's not Krishna, it's the unborn within him. Just like, earlier Prabhupada mentioned, like some people say, the first verse of Bhagavad Gita where it says, Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samvetta yutsava mamaka pandavasyaiva kim akurvata Sanjaya. So Dharma kshetre kurukshetre, some scholars again interpret, this kurukshetra refers to the body, just like the field or the kshetra refers to the field. So Kurukshetra, actually it's metaphorical. It's not referring to the Kurukshetra where the Pandavas and the Arjuna and the Kauravas have assembled, but it's the Kurukshetra is actually our body, and within our body we have virtues and we have vices, and the virtues are Pandavas, and the vices are Kauravas. Is all metaphorical, right? So that's an interpretation. Like here Sanjaya is directly saying, he's mentioning a historical fact that, okay, Kurukshetra, we know Kurukshetra is a place in India. It still exists. You can go and see that. And the Pandavas have assembled, the Kauravas have assembled, the war is about to begin. So why one has to interpret that, okay, Kurukshetra is not referring to any of that, but is referring to our body, and within our existence we have vices and virtues, and there is a conflict between the two at all the time. And so, it's all, at that point, it is no point in studying Bhagavad Gita. If we are to bring us come up with such analogies and speculative analogies, then it defeats the purpose. Okay, any questions on this point? I think I spent a lot of time, but I think this is very important. How Arjuna is approaching Krishna, and how we should approach. I think we covered quite a few important philosophical points. Any questions on this one? Okay, so let's go on to verse number 8. Nahi prapashyami mama panudyat Yachchokamuchchosanam indriyanam avapya bhumava asapatnam vriddham rajyam suranam apichadipatyam. Translation: I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it, even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in the heaven. Right. So here Arjuna is saying, see, earlier the argument was in one of the purports of Prabhupada is mentioning that, hey, it's a win-win situation, right? If you see from Kshatriya point of view, one is if one wins the war, then one gets an unrivaled kingdom. And if one loses the war, but because one loses the war and one dies, while one is dying while performing one's duty, especially for a Kshatriya to die during war or while fighting, according to the principles of Dharma, will lead them to ascend to heavenly planets. And so in that sense, one may say a win-win situation. But Arjuna is saying that even if it's not either or, even if I get both, how he can get both? He not only wins the kingdom, but because being registered to perform a Rajsuya Yagya, it's equivalent to having a life of living like demigods right here on the earth. So even if I get both, it won't be worth it. So he's sort of again going back to the same argument. Yeah, so we discussed that. So Arjuna was putting many arguments based on knowledge of principles of religion, moral codes. We already talked about that. He could understand that his so-called knowledge was useless in driving away his problems, which were drying up his whole existence. And it was impossible for him to solve such perplexities without the help of spiritual master like Lord Krishna. So he used different arguments, but despite of talking in that philosophical way, right? He was saying, oh, this is my reason why I don't want to fight. But if his philosophy was so strong, then it should satisfy him. He should not feel miserable. See, what was Arjuna's problem? He said, okay, I'm not going to fight. And he gave so many reasons, right? Moral reasons and this, and according to principles of dharma, this and that, he said so many things. But if he was so firmly fixed in it, then with his decision that he doesn't want to fight, he should be happy. He came to a conclusion, hey, okay, this is the right thing to do, and it doesn't matter, and I'm going to not fight and just be happy. Why is he miserable? Right? Why? Because he said, though he was giving up all these excuses in a very apparently intelligent way, he could in deep within his heart, he could understand that his so-called arguments and his justification, they are all useless because he's still miserable. And then when he really realizes this, that's actually when he's surrendering to Krishna. And that's what Srila Prabhupada is saying. It was impossible for him to solve the perplexities by all his moral codes and all his arguments, and then he had to finally approach the Lord as a spiritual master. So academic knowledge, scholarship, high position, they're all useless in solving the problems of life. And one can get real help only from a spiritual master who is like Krishna. Therefore, the conclusion is a spiritual master who is 100% Krishna conscious is a bona fide spiritual master, for he can solve the problems of life. And so one who really knows the science of spirit, that person can help. So Lord Chaitanya, he says that it doesn't matter what the social position of that person is. Kiba Pipra Kribanasi Sudra Kene Noy, Yei Krishna Tattva Vekta Shai Guru Hoy. It doesn't matter whether someone is a Vipra, a learned Brahmana. It doesn't matter if he's a sannyasi or a Sudra. So one who knows the knowledge of spirit is a guru. That person can guide you, and a social position doesn't matter. So there are so many other descriptions. Similarly, Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says that without being devotee of Krishna, without being a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, no one is a bona fide spiritual master. So there are so many different kind of gurus, and they might teach us so many other things, and they're all respectable. But the one who is a devotee of Krishna can give us devotion, right? If source has something then it can be given to the recipients. If it does not exist in the source, we cannot get it. So if the ultimate aim of the life is to become a devotee and to re-establish a relationship with Krishna in one of the 5 moods of those relationships that we talked about: neutral relationship, servant, friend, parental affection, and conjugal lover, um, then the person, the guru, has to be a devotee, right? Then one can imbibe devotion from that individual. And so ultimate qualification for uh, being a qualified guru in this particular context, right, it is that or in any other context, the ultimate aim of life is to realize our Satchitananda form, is that one has to be a devotee. So it says, so this particular verse it doesn't have a source. It is also said in the Vedic literature. Prabhupada mentioned is that a scholarly Brahmana, expert in all subjects of Vedic knowledge, is unfit to become a spiritual master if that individual is not a devotee, is not a Vaishnava, or one who is expert in the science of devotion, Krishna consciousness. But a person, even if that person is born in a lower caste, according to social consideration, he can be accepted as a spiritual master if that individual is a Vaishnava. Now, this one Padma Purana says that. So the problems of material existence, namely birth, old age, disease, and death, cannot be counteracted by accumulation of wealth and economic development. In many parts of the world, Srila Prabhupada is saying that there are states which have all replete facilities. They're full of wealth, they're economically developed. And still these 4 problems exist: birth, old age, disease, and death. So the real peace can be achieved only if we get this guidance from Krishna based on the instructions that he personally provided in the form of Bhagavad Gita. And Srimad Bhagavatam, which constitute it's basically case study of all the pastimes of Krishna and different incarnations of Krishna and the devotees, how they actually practiced. So this is science, we're going to learn all the theory. But in Srimad Bhagavatam, you will see actually the case studies, just like, if you in either in science or social science, or even you go to business school, they talked about theory of management, and then there are case studies, and the case studies, we see those theories actually being applied. Hey, well, they applied it, they could do it, you could also do it, same thing. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, we see those practical examples or case studies of how this science, which is presented in Bhagavad Gita, was applied by so many individuals across all spectrums of life, across all social orders, different age spectrums, even different species of life. So it's not, no one is barred. It's one can achieve perfection in any state of material existence. So Srila Prabhupada is further explaining that even if economic development, material comforts could drive away one's lamentation for family, society, country, or international issues, then Arjuna would not have said that even if I got an unrivaled kingdom on the earth, or even if I got the supremacy of the demigods in the heavenly planets, still I would not be able to drive my lamentation. So what to speak of others, right? After performing Rajasuya Yagya, Yudhishthir was on the way to becoming the unchallenged king of the entire planet. And Arjuna, being his younger brother, he would have access to the same kind of um, enjoyment or luxuries, if you will. And if the Rajasuya Yagya is not an ordinary thing at the time, if you perform Rajasuya Yagya, you have to invite the demigods. The Rajasuya Yagya of Yudhishthira Maharaj, Lord Shiva was present, Brahma was present, Indra, all the sages. And so they were not any less than demigods right here on the earth. And so Arjuna is saying, even if I got both, I would still be miserable. So what to speak about any other kind of powerful positions in this world? If we become a president at the most, 8 years, even if one is the richest person, they are always worried about what will happen. I might be rich for some time, but I won't be rich anymore, right? Like Jeff Bezos made the comment that, well, one day Amazon might become bankrupt. Like, so for him to make that public statement, it was something that he might be experiencing some sort of anxiety. Or when the Microsoft got the contract, the defense contract for the Azure cloud services, and despite of being the and the most richest person in the world, he's like, hey, why did I not get the contract? Like, why did Amazon Web Services did not get the contract? Right? So that kind of anxiety is always there, right? So despite of having everything, there is another kind of lamentation, right? So there is no end to this unless one seeks spiritual perfection, following the spiritual science which is presented in Bhagavad Gita. Even elevation to higher planets, planetary situation, as men are now seeking. So there is talk of different space travel and establishing colonies on other planets. But here, while the living condition is so favorable, you can live naturally without any artificial means, life is possible. Still, we have so many miseries. What to speak about going to another planet, which is where it's not easy to live. The atmosphere is not conducive, and we're talking about making colonies on Mars, for instance. What's how? First of all, one has to put so much effort just to make it habitable, and even if one makes it habitable, then there are problems which still remain unsolved: birth, old age, disease, and death. So therefore, Bhagavad Gita is confirming when the results of pious act. So what to speak about going to other planet? Even if one goes to heavenly planets, right, and one gets the body of a demigod, even that is temporary. It's not permanent, right? So just like if I have a line of credit on my credit card, I can use the credit card only to the limit that I have, right? And then I have to pay the debt again. Or if I have cash balance in my savings account or checking account, I can only withdraw the amount of money which is there. So our pious activities are like our checking account. So we can get a body of a demigod in a heavenly planet and enjoy those luxuries only to the extent our pious credit is there. Once those credits are over, one again has to come back to this earth in a lower status of life, most likely a human form of life, and then has to start all again. So when the results of the pious activities are finished, one falls down again from the peak happiness to the lowest status of life. So that is in context to the heavenly kingdom. But even in this world, we see there are so many different powerful politicians, and they were very powerful at one point in time. And what happened? Eventually, they fell down. And you can think of many examples, right? So we had Saddam Hussein. He was ruling with an iron fist over the country of Iraq, and then after Iraq was completely bombed to ruins, and he was hiding in a rat hole. And I believe it was the SEALs or he finally got some intelligence. They found him. He was inside the rabbit hole. He was all disheveled and very miserable situation. Long beard, and they were making him open his mouth. And once such a powerful person, right? And he was imprisoned. He was put to the international crime tribunals, war crime tribunals, and he had to, there was judgment passed against him, and even eventually died. So there are many other examples. So such downfalls only constitute more cause of lamentation. So even in our worldly existence, we see that there are many examples of powerful politicians and leaders who ultimately died, or they were degraded. Like Napoleon, he was a great conqueror. He say that he only used to sleep 1 or 2 hours, and he's always thinking about which land to conquer, how to go about it. And what did he say, right? I think this is a quote from him. He says, "The graveyard is full of indispensable men." So there is a paradox over here, it seems. But if all the great people who are considered indispensable, where are they right now? It was like, without these individuals, where the world would not go on. Well, they are all in the graveyard. The world's still going on, right? So ultimately, the point is, again, our social position. See, one's economic development, comforts, our social positions, none of them can really bring a solution to the real happiness that the soul is seeking, right? What the soul is really desiring cannot be satisfied. It's just like a person who has unlimited thirst, and that for thirst to be quenched, one needs natural spring water in unlimited quantity. But if one is in a desert, like we are in this material world, there is no water, and there is only a mirage of water, so reservoirs, but there is no real water. And even if one finds, it's very less quantity, and it's probably polluted. So that is the situation. So there are all the different examples that are given for us to understand the situation that Arjuna is experiencing. To conclude, he's saying that, hey, if I get unrivaled kingdom or the sovereignty, not or, and even and the sovereignty of the demigods, it still won't drive away my grief. So then he concludes with that, and then we'll continue next time. And in the essence, Sanjaya finally, he tells Dhritarashtra, we'll discuss this next time, but I'm just reading the translation. He tells Krishna that, hey, I shall not fight. But Sanjaya, he actually uses the word that Gudakesha is telling Rishikesha that I'm not going to fight. And so Gudakesha means one who conquers ignorance. So Sanjay is telling Dhritarashtra, don't be happy. Though Arjuna is not saying he's not going to fight, because he's Gudakesha, and because that means he's capable of conquering ignorance, and he's the guidance of Rishikesha, he's a master of senses, and he's also referred to as Parantapa, the chastiser of the enemies. That means he will resume his original identity as a chastiser of the enemies, and the war will happen. So that's the essence of it. I don't think I have to say anything more. I think we can count this verse completed. It's a short purport. In essence, that's what it's saying. And from the 10th verse, then Krishna smilingly starts speaking, and then the rest of the conversation, Krishna will explain, and Arjuna will listen. So now Krishna's instruction actually begins. And then he will talk about, well, there is never a time when I did not exist, you did not exist, the kings, nor these kings. And so this is he's priming up to explain, what it means the king did not exist in the past or future. Means, we are not this body, we are the soul, and he will present a technical and analytical explanation of the soul. So we'll continue on from from verse number 10 next time. So there's not nothing much in the 9th. I already sort of covered it, but we'll recite the verse next time. Okay, anyone? We're already over time. Anyone has any final questions, comments before we conclude? Just a sec. I think my speaker's not connected. Yeah, go ahead. Can you repeat that again? I see a hand raised. Parulben, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question. So you talked about 5 different types of devotees, right? Arhat, Jigyasu, Artha Arthi, and Jnani. But you didn't. The 5th one is Hirisi, is what I.
No, there are 4 only.
Only 4. Okay.
There are only 4. Yeah.
Okay.
Artho Jigyasu, that is second. Artha Arthi, that means one who is seeking something of value. And then Jnani is the 4th. There's only 4. Sensual, mental, intellectual, transcendental. 4. There are 4 coverings of the soul.
Okay.
And then each of them are at a different level.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question anyone has?
Actually, I don't know why I got this thought in the middle when you actually explained. I don't exactly remember when it was related to the Krishna and he's the form. You said there is nothing internal or external to him. He's completely is the thing, right? I don't have this doubt before. I just got this thought. I got this thought in the middle. Why Krishna is Krishna in that avatar but not in previous? Like, why in case of Rama avatar, why is not Krishna? I mean, why is not doing what Krishna is doing? Why he have to take a different forms every time he take a new avatar? I don't know the reason, but one of the analogy that I could think of is like it is something that he is also improving in terms of his ability, or maybe what is a required thing. He only, created himself into the thing that is only required and just did that and come out. It could be that also, but I'm just trying to understand like why he had to take a different forms every time.
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. So one thing first, we need to understand that it's not that when Lord Krishna appears as Rama is a new form that he created for that need. All these forms, they eternally exist. Lord Rama also eternally exists in the spiritual world. In spiritual sky, there is a planet, Ramachandra Loka. So there is a spiritual planet where the Lord Rama eternally resides in that particular form. So it's not that this form is temporarily created when the Lord appears over here. All these forms, whatever they appear on this earth, they eternally exist in the spiritual world. So there's no, first of all, that they are created in any moment of time as per need. The reason why these different forms exist is because different devotees also have different desires and different mood of exchanging their devotion, and the Lord also wants to experience that. So there is no question of improvement. The Lord is all perfect. It's just people, they are attracted to that personality. It is their nature. And like Hanuman, he's eternally exists. Lord Ramchandra eternally exists. And for some devotees, they are in that mood. They can relate more to Lord Rama. Even in spiritual world, I'm not talking about in material world. They are perfectly situated devotees in proper spiritual consciousness, but they have love and devotion for Lord Ramchandra. And everyone has a different spiritual identity, and so they worship, and they not just worship, but they engage in these devotional, fulfilling relationships as per their nature, according to different forms of the Lord. So the spiritual sky is the 3/4 of the creation. This material world where this birth, old age, disease is only 1/4 of the creation. In 1/4 of the creation, there are millions of universes. Our universe is only one of them. So if the 3/4 of the creation is spiritual sky, it's not just Goloka, Vrindavan, where Krishna's form exists. There are innumerable forms of the Lord. We can't even count. Lord Ramchandra just being one, and all these forms, they eternally exist in the spiritual world. So there is no question of improvement. It's just that there are different rasas and there are different moods, and which the Lord is also experiencing, and the devotees are also experiencing or situated in that mood. There is no higher or lower comparison in that regard. Yeah.
Thank you, bro. Prabhu, I have a question on the 4 kinds of pious men who offer devotional service.
Yeah.
You talked about the 4 kinds of 4 kinds of pious men, right? So where does the devotees come into picture in this?
The 4 kind of pious men who approach Krishna, right? So yeah, so the devotees, they are not approaching Krishna to gain something. The pure devotees, they are naturally situated in their original relationship. So this is now, if you talk about a sadhakas, or if you look at our situation, we probably originally approached Krishna because of one of the 4 reasons. Originally, being in ignorance, we did not approach Krishna out of pure devotion. Even Dhruva Maharaj did not approach Vishnu out of pure devotion. He wanted the kingdom greater than his grandfather, Lord Brahma. He was Arthi. He wanted something. But after focusing on, meditating on Vishnu, he realized, well, this is not the purpose of life. Then he became a pure devotee. But initially, he did not approach out of pure devotion. So here, these 4 categories are referring to how people, they take from material life to spiritual life, and no one takes material life to spiritual life out of pure devotion. They are seeking something that can benefit them. The pure devotees are a completely different category that exists independently. It's their original swabhav, mood, roop. They are already situated in there. There's no question of approaching. It's I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Yeah, that answers.
Okay, anyone else has further questions?
Actually, I have one other question. Earlier you recited a verse about one must alone feel the benefits of the pious activities, and one must alone feel the misery. Can you provide a pointer to that verse?
Yeah, I'll send it over. It's in Srimad Bhagavatam. I'll send it over WhatsApp.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Can we conclude the class, or anyone has any further comments, questions?
Thank you so much for the class.
You're welcome. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. See you all next week. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.